Good morning. It's good to have you. Ryan, thank you for that psalm, my friend. That's pretty unbelievable. And we're kicking off a series actually called Prayers Worth Praying because, friends, that's what the Psalms are. They're these raw, real, dangerous, uncensored expressions to God from human hearts. And we have a tendency to try to take the Psalms and turn them into doctrines and make teachings of them, and that's just not why they're there. But because what we realize as a church is you're going through a difficult time, a tragedy, any kind of a struggle like we're in the midst of as a body and as individuals, our struggles can do one of two things. They either lead us towards God, to a closer relationship, or they lead us away. And so we've decided as a body that it's important for us to learn to pray and seek God's presence and power together. And so we're going to start with Psalm 13 this week, and it's one of my favorite Psalms, and so if you want to turn there, that's fine. Marcus Dodds was a 3rd century theologian who wrote this to his sister. If you could direct me to anything more exquisite than the 13th Psalm, I would follow your direction with reckless abandon. In other words, there might not be a more beautiful picture of how to wrestle with God in all of the Bible than the 13th Psalm. And so let's kind of read that together. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me, O Lord, and answer. O Lord my God, give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. My enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, for he's been good to me. Will you pray? May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. By the way, the Hebrew worship leaders, they had categories for the different psalms. And so when you read the book of Psalms, it's important to know that there are all kinds of psalms in that collection, and you don't read all of the psalms the same way. For example, there are some psalms that are called psalms of praise, and they were literally used in the worship services in the Hebrew community. Psalms like Psalm 150 that says, let everything that has breath praise the Lord, over and over again. It repeats that, and they would sing that at their worship services. There are also psalms that are known as psalms of thanksgiving. And at their Thanksgiving feasts in the Hebrew community, they would recite those psalms. Psalms like Psalm 100 that says, I will enter his gates with thanksgiving in my heart, and I will enter his courts with praise. There's also another category of psalms called royal psalms. Psalm 2 is an example of a royal psalm, and what they would do is they would declare how God was working in the nation of Israel. There's also a category called wisdom psalms. The very first psalm is a wisdom psalm. It reads kind of like a proverb, these general wisdom expressions to God. Psalm 137 is an example of what is called an imprecatory psalm. It's a psalm that literally would just cry out for justice, for God's revenge to happen because of wrong things that were done. The psalm we're talking about today, Psalm 13, is a different kind of psalm. It is a psalm of lament. Say that with me, lament. And by the way, laments had 3 very specific stages to them. The first stage of a lament was called the complaint. It's called the complaint. And literally the person writing, David in Psalm 13, would just kind of usher out a complaint that they were feeling in their life. I know some of you are thinking right there, well, my wife's got that part of the Psalms down. But they would literally, so David would literally, in this psalm, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever, was kind of his complaint. So in a lament, they would start out and they would just issue any kind of, like, God, like, what's going on here? Where are you in my life? God, what's going on is totally awful, and won't you do something about it? The second part of the psalm of a lament was an appeal. Literally, the writer would make a bold appeal. So they would start with the complaint, and then they would ask God to do something very specific. Here's my complaint. Here, God, is what I would like you to do about that complaint. And the third part of a lament was when the author of the psalm would make a bold expression of confidence in trust that God was going to do something about the problem. And so every lament that's in the book of Psalms follows that strategy. The complaint followed by the appeal, followed by an expression of confidence in God. And Psalm 13 functions exactly that way. The writer lays out a complaint before God. By the way, in many of the laments, the writer of the psalm will come out and they will directly say what was going on in their lives to warrant the complaint. David never does that in Psalm 13. Never once does he come out and say, this is actually what was going on. They do that in some of the Psalms. But let's look at that complaint a little bit closer. Verses 1 and 2. David starts out, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you turn your face away from me? How long will I wrestle with my thoughts and every single day after day have pain in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? In other words, David's complaint, I don't think I would be stepping out on a limb here, is a complaint that most of us at some point in our time, in our life, have had with God. Where is God in the middle of my pain? And although David never comes out and outwardly states what that complaint is, we can learn some things just from the nature of how he said it. For example, whatever David was going through, it must have been going on for what seems like forever. Because 4 times in the complaint, David says, how long, how long, how long, how... He just goes on and on like this. It must have been going on for a while. I can remember being in college. I had moved away from small little Prince Edward Island, and I had moved to Kentucky, just dropped in the middle of nowhere. And I can remember from that point on in my life, like, I watched my parents growing up, and they were in love, and I remember just praying that at some point in my life, I would find the person that I could marry. And there were years and year after year would go by, and I remember lying in bed thinking, God, how long, oh Lord, before you bring that woman to my, how long before I find the person you love? For David, this trial had been going on, whatever it was, for a while. And there was something about what was going on in his life that it caused him to doubt his confidence in God. How long ago, remember he said, will you forget me forever? It's like, God, are you even there? Like, have I mistaken myself about your presence somehow? And whatever David was going through, by the way, it was something of the nature that it tormented him. It haunted him day in and day out, every single day. God, do I have to have this sorrow in my heart? And there was something about what was going on in his life that he felt like he was under attack. Will my enemies triumph over me? And we don't know exactly what it was, but my friends, the most troubling part of it was how indifferent God seemed to be to his cries for help. God, do you even care? Are you even listening? How long? How long? By the way, when Hebrew writers would use repetition, they would do it because that was their way of saying, this is the point of what I'm saying. How long, O Lord? Literally says, will you forget me forever? Will you forget me forever? Do you know what David is doing when he says, will you forget me forever? Literally what he's doing, he's reminding God of a promise that God had made to them. He's reminding God, it's like David saying, okay, God, I'm going to hold you accountable. Because in your word, God, you said this, but I don't see it playing out in my life. And he's holding God accountable to the promise. God, you've got to come through. You told me this, but you're not doing it. Jeremiah does the same thing in Jeremiah 15. He says, God, look, I'm in this mess, and I've got all these horrible things happening, and I don't see you in the middle of it, God. In verse 18 in Jeremiah 15, he actually goes so far as to say, God, are you a liar? Like, are you a deceptive brook? That you would tell us, Deuteronomy 31:6, you would tell us that I will never leave or forsake you, yet when I need you the most, you're not there. That's what he's doing. They're praying God's promises. And I want to tell you, friends, that's not a bad way to pray. There have been times in my life in the middle of some of the greatest struggles I've been in where I've wondered, God, what about your promise? Your word says this, but I don't see it, God. Let me tell you, friends, we've got to learn to pray that way, to hold God accountable to his promises. But in order to know and be able to do that, we've got to know what they are. And to know what they are, we have to know this book. Because so many people come up to me and they say, you know what, I just feel like my prayers don't make sense. God's not answering. I don't hear him in my prayers. But if you're not in this book, and this book is how you know God, if you don't know God, how can you have a conversation with someone that you do not know? And maybe, just maybe, the problem with your prayers is not God's silence. but it's that you don't know what his promises are to even pray them. And the complaint goes on. David says this, will you hide your face from me? What's implied in this is simple. God, have I done something wrong here? Did I screw up and that's why you're not answering my prayers? Like I did I do something so humiliating and shameful to you that you can't even look at me? And I can't tell you how many times I've had people stop by my house or call me on the phone or stop by my office, and they say that's exactly how they feel God is treating them. They'll say, God, have I done something wrong? Jacques, like, why isn't he listening? Do I deserve what God's allowing to happen in my life? And that's exactly what David's wondering. What did I do that when I need you most, you're not here? You want nothing to do with me. And so David lays out this complaint before God. And I know that with everything going on in this church, everything going on in your lives right now, with the loss that you've suffered, you have some valid complaints. You have some valid complaints. And the problem is the church, have you ever noticed they kind of try to make people feel guilty for having complaints? Right? Like, oh, that's a bad thing. And we take Philippians 2:5, which says, do everything with arguing and complaining. We take that out of context. And the problem is not having complaints. The problem is not looking at our lives and saying, this is not right. It should not be that way. There's a right way and there's a wrong way. And the lament teaches us the right way to handle our complaints. It's not to gossip. It's not to bottle it up inside. The lament teaches us that we ought to boldly make our complaints known to God. Lay them out before his throne. Cry out to the Creator and let him hear your pain. It's raw and it's real. And I don't know about you. I would much rather be a part of a church that is honest with their pain and suffering than be a part of a church that forces people to put on plastic smiles when they walk in here and pretend things are okay when they're really not. Make your complaints known. Don't sit on them. Then David moves to the next part of the lament, where he makes a bold appeal to God. Let's read this together. Look on me and answer, O Lord, my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. My enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. I love that. Look on me, God, and answer. Pay attention. All I want is a little bit of clarity here, God, because your silence is killing me. I mean, he goes on to say at the end, I would rather die than live in your silence. God, your silence is deadly. By the way, let's kind of take a show of hands here. How many people have ever before been given the silent treatment? Probably by the person sitting beside you, right? Isn't that the worst? I can remember when I was in high school, my best friend in high school, his name was Brenton Dickinson, and he and I and my buddies, every year we would travel to these youth retreats that were scattered all over the Maritime provinces. And is this thing, can I just get a handheld or something like that? Yeah, next time just like run up and slap me. All right, can you, thank you. Golden. Oh, that's so much better. Oh, man, awesome. So my friend Brent and I, in our crew, we used to go out to all these retreats. And I can remember one time it was the most amazing thing. We show up and we go to this retreat. I think it was a summer before my senior year of high school. And it was in this place called Nova Scotia, if you're familiar at all with Canada. And so we pack up a car and we go over there. Brent had a white Volkswagen Golf. And so 4 of us could fit in there. We went over there. And what they used to do is we would partner with other churches, and they would hook us up at homes, and we would stay at these homes. We called them billets, and we would camp out at their houses. And there we go. Is that less distracting? Because I was getting whipped. And we'd stay at their houses. And we showed up one time at this house. We went to a youth conference over there, and it was the most incredible experience. We walked in the door, and they're standing right in front of our eyes, the people that signed up to house us 4 guys, and one of the persons in the room in this kitchen was standing there, was the most beautiful young lady we'd ever seen. And so we're all looking at each other, and all of a sudden Brenton looks at me, and I look at him, and we're like, it's on. Right? And we're like, one of us are going to win the affection of this girl. And so we made it into a competition. We talked about it. We're like, I'm going to win her over. He's like, no, I'm going to win her over. And I'm like, no. And so the whole week, we would do things to try to impress her. We laid it on thick. And I'm here to tell you today, It's a total God thing. She made the right choice. She chose me, and by the way, that was like so exciting for me, like, she picked me, and Brenton, he was destroyed over this. He was mad, he was embarrassed, he was not a happy camper. By the way, best friends, that's probably about the worst thing you could ever do to a friendship is to have that kind of a competition. Because on Thursday night, I was leaning over Brenton's car, he was on the other side, we were talking to each other, the door of the car was open, I said, Brenton, I got a favor for you. He said, what's up? I said, is it possible if I could borrow your car to take Jamie to a movie? And he looked at me, he's like, not over my dead body. I said, what do you mean, dude? We're best friends. That's what friends do for each other. They love each other. They sacrifice. Please let me take your car. He's like, no, never. I said, come on, dude. I said, you've got to let me do it. I said, I'll pay you. I'll give you gas money. I'll give you whatever you want. Just let me take her out. He's like, nope, not a chance. And I was so mad at the time. I looked at him. I said, it's just because she chose me and not you, right? Get over it. You're fat and ugly. Have you ever said something where you could actually see the words as they're moving out of your mouth and slowly, and you can't do anything to get those words back? I felt horrible. And as soon as I said, I'm like, no, I didn't. And Brenton takes the car door and he slams the car door shut and he marches off, and he didn't talk to me the whole week. What a jerk, right? The whole week he didn't talk to me. I felt so bad. I ran after him. I'm like, Brent, please talk to me about this. And I got to the point where I'm like, dude, like, just punch me or something. Like, seriously, insult me, berate me, embarrass me in front of my friends. I can handle that, but this silence thing is killing me. And I can tell you before, I've given Emily on different occasions the silent treatment, and she's given it to me. And of all the forms of punishment to me, that's the worst. But it's never worse than when you feel like it's God who's the one who's being silent. It's God who's not answering, right? Especially when we're told in John chapter 10, Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. And when I speak, they hear me by voice, and I call their name. And they know when we have these conversations. And I can remember being in the middle of problems and struggles as a young adult and thinking, well, if that's the case, God, it would be really good if you spoke my name right now. It would be really good if I could hear your voice right now, because all I want, God, is an answer here. Am I asking for too much? Because I can deal with a lot of things, God, but your silence is not one of them. I can live in pain. I can accept a loss. I can hurt and go on. But I can't live without hearing your voice and feeling your presence and knowing your love. And folks, I dare you to be so bold as to, without apology and, well, without hesitation and with full confidence, boldly make your appeals known to God. God, here is what I need you to do. Psalm 5:3, David said, in the morning, you hear my voice. In the morning it says, I lay my requests before you and I wait in expectation. And the lament teaches us that you and I can expect from God. By the way, the second part of the appeal says what? Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. By the way, I've heard a lot of people try to teach that passage and say what David's saying to God here is be a light to my path, and I want a little more clarity, and it's not the case at all. What David's saying in that is this: God, I'm depressed, I'm hurt, I'm tired, I'm burnt out. I don't even want to get up out of bed in the morning. If you're going to get me up, you're going to have to pry my eyes open because I'm dying here. And I don't even have to ask for a show of hands. How many people, if you're in this room, you would admit that you're at that exact same place? How many people in this room would admit that, yeah, I'm depressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm going through this struggle, I'm hurt, I'm spent, I don't even want to get out of bed in the morning. And you've tried everything to distract yourself. You've tried taking medications. You've tried sitting in front of the TV. You've tried your electronic gadgets, but nothing seems to work. The sadness and the depression just sinks further and further. It's all you feel about. It's all you feel. You don't even know where to go from here. And the big question, where is God in all of this, is the most difficult question of all in this church. We have had this past year tragedy after tragedy and loss after loss. Heck, this past month, we watched Terry and Sonny a month ago bury their 17-year-old girl Sheridan. She should be graduating this month. She should be going to prom this month. Instead, we had to say goodbye. 2 weeks ago on this stage on Sunday morning, Courtney and Rich were preparing to lead worship when they got a phone call. Their 2-year-old nephew Shane, 2 years old, had died. We watched a man we love 4 weeks ago who led this congregation stand on stage and break down in tears because of choices he made and the choice to step down. I buried a 31-year-old man this year, in the prime of his life, who was just starting to get his life together and connected with our young adults at hard times, was just starting to get his life together when he died. Just around a year ago, Emily and I, our little baby girl, Addie's birthday was also her death day. There are congregation members that are here in this congregation right now who are facing surgeries and stuff where life is hanging in the balance. People like Brenda Kramer is awaiting heart surgery, and she knows her life is hanging in the balance. We have people in this church whose parents are 70 or 80 or 90, and they're deteriorating, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. We have families in this church, friends, who are falling apart at the seams financially because they've lost their job, and they can't pay their bills, and they're amassing debt, and they don't have health care. And we have kids who have parents who are separating from each other, and they're giving up in our marriage. And so we look to God and we say, this is our appeal. This is our cry. God, answer our prayers. Because what the lament teaches us, friends, is this: that when the rug is pulled out from under us in life and our problems are becoming bigger than we can handle, the answer is never getting the brightest and the best minds in the room and trying to think our way through problems. Our answer is to fall on our knees and humble ourselves before our God and make our appeal to Him. For God says, my ways are not your ways, and my thoughts are not my thoughts. And if you want my power in your problem, it means humbling yourself and falling on your knees. So we cry out. We cry out and make our appeal. And then David comes to the third part of the lament, the expression of confidence in God, which baffles me, to be honest. Says this: but I trust God in your unfailing love. My heart does somersaults in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for He is good to me. And I sit there and I read this. How can you pray that after everything you're going through and in the middle of, David? And I talk to people all the time, Christians, followers of Jesus, churchgoers, whatever you want to call them, who punish themselves because they have doubts and they're doubting their faith, and they feel guilty because they don't feel God's presence in their life, or they're wondering, how could a good God let that kind of evil stuff happen, or how come He's not there in the middle of my pain? And I've wrestled with those questions before. And for those of you who, like David, are in the middle of a time of doubt, or you're in a very, very dark place right now, my heart breaks for you. And I hope, friends, I pray that you will continue putting your complaints to God and making bold appeals. But I've learned something the past couple years. You see, my family, Emily and I and the girls, have been through some pretty heavy stuff the past 2 years. Trials that have tested our faith, that have tested our resolve, that have tested our marriage. 2 years ago, Emily and I decided to add 2 girls to our family, to our already rambunctious Dryden and Soleil, and we brought in Mackenzie and Lily. We adopted them from China. And we set out first to bring Mackenzie home. We found out about her, loved her. We thought when we got her file, China told us that she had a minor heart defect, but other than that, she was socially advanced, academically advanced, and we get her home and we find out it's completely the opposite. We find out that she has had an ear infection, a medical issue left untreated for over years, so much so that a cholesteatoma grew inside of her head and cracked her skull and ruined her hearing, and so we've been recovering from that. She's got a genetic disorder. She was tied to a crib for the first 3 years of her life with no human interaction, and so she's got this huge developmental delay, and learning's very difficult for her, and so we're bringing her in, and it's been a blast, but there have been some real challenges. And in the middle of falling in love with Mackenzie and bringing her home, we came across Lily's file. And so all of a sudden we're like, should we do that? Yeah, why not? And so we bring Lily home. Lily had already had 2 heart surgeries in China. And the third one was so intense that they weren't even going to do it. She was listed as terminal in China. So we're like, you know what? They'll do it here. They'll try it here. And so we brought her home. And 3 months after she came home, she was on the operating table for a procedure that was supposed to land her in the hospital for 10 days. 3 months later, the doctors tell us that the very surgery that was meant to correct her heart has rejected, which set us off into a motion of surgeries after surgeries and procedures after procedures and hospital stay after hospital stay. 12 months, friends, 12 months of this past year. Emily has lived at Children's Hospital sleeping on a sofa because she has vowed that this girl will not suffer alone for even one night. And now she's waiting on a heart transplant. And we never know what's going to happen. This week she was sick, so we took her to the hospital, and all of a sudden we get sucked into another emergency surgery that we didn't see coming. And I want to tell you, friends, this has been hard on our family. Their girls, Dryden and Soleil, because they miss their mom, and I miss my wife, and we all miss Lily, and everybody. It's just been a load for us. Listening to Lily suffer, watching, and you can't do anything about it. And it's been a bear. And then in the middle of all of that, you remember Emily came to me one day and said, Jacques, there's something I need to tell you. I think I might be pregnant. And I look at her, I'm like, don't blame me, like, why you? And so all of a sudden, right, we're going to have another baby in the middle of this. We're going to have another baby. Like, how are we going to do this? Oh, we'll figure out a way. Dryden was healthy, Soleil was healthy, and we just assumed that our new baby would be healthy. Until a month or so later, we were sitting in a doctor's office, and he was going over an ultrasound, and he saw something that made him think a little bit, so he ran some more tests, and we got a phone call and found out that our little baby has Down syndrome. And we were shocked and like, what? How? No, how, what? That can't be, not our family. No, how are we going to handle this now? We don't know how to take care of that. We got this and this and this. There's no way. And so we were freaked out. So the next few weeks we spent researching Down syndrome babies, and all of a sudden we started bumping into families who had Down syndrome babies. And all of a sudden we discovered from talking to these people that Down syndrome babies, their spirit of innocence, their spirit of joy, have an incredible effect on these families. And people are aborting them, and they're terminating these pregnancies. And we're like, no, no, no. And all of a sudden we go from being shocked and frustrated to incredibly excited. Woohoo! We have a Down syndrome baby. And just when we have absorbed the reality of everything going on with there, we're sitting in the office again with a different set of doctors who say, oh, we noticed something in one of the tests we did, and your baby has a major heart defect. And we'll need open heart surgery 3 months after your baby's born. And we absorbed that and went, okay, you know what? We know the doctors are the same people that worked on Lily will work on this baby. We're going to be fine. And everything was going according to plan with this pregnancy, right? And 3 days before Addie was to be born, 3 days, Emily just didn't feel right in her belly, and so she decided to go into the hospital. I was sitting in a meeting with our worship team when my phone rang, and Emily was crying on the other end of the phone. They can't find a heartbeat. They can't find a heartbeat. You need to come right away. And I got up and I just ran over across the street to the birthing center of the hospital. And when I walked into the room, all I saw was Emily shaking her head. And when Addie died, I was depressed out of my mind. I mean, I tried to keep my head up. I tried to be strong for Emily, strong for the girls, and to a degree I was. But the pain of losing her, it was a different kind of pain than I'd ever felt before. I mean, day after day for months, it would happen every day at the most unexpected time. I could be driving or sitting in my office or playing with my girls, and this wave of emotion would just sweep over me, and I would erupt in tears. Because I didn't know what to do with it. I mean, my energy levels were down. I just wanted to be alone. People would call me, my friends would text me, hey, let's get together soon. I would just send a generic text back, okay, yeah, we'll do that, we'll get together soon. I was crushed, seeing Emily hurt all day, every day. And I would go by Dryden and Soleil's bedroom at night, and sometimes I would hear them crying, and I would open the door, and I would cuddle in bed with them, and Soleil or Dryden would be crying, I just want Addie, I wish we had my sister, can God give us back Addie? I would just wrap my arms around them. We'd cry each other to sleep as they were trying to make sense of everything. Here's the weird thing, friends. I remember once sitting on the deck with a couple of my dudes. John and Larkin were having cigars on the deck, and they were just kind of checking in on me. And they asked me, how you doing? What's going on? And I don't remember which one of them said it, but one of them said, listen, I know you've got to be angry with God over everything going on. And I remember stopping him and saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, here's the weird thing. This whole thing has wiped me out and ripped my heart apart in ways that I've never could have imagined. But to be honest, through this whole ordeal, not even for a second, I know it sounds weird, have I ever even been angry in the middle of it. Now, Emily was. And here's why. Because Emily, all of a sudden, in the middle of this process, started connecting dots. I mean, you can ask her about it. She'll tell you. Like, I remember when she sat me down and she said, God, guess what, Jacques? I figured out what God's doing. I said, what do you mean? You figured out what God's doing? I know what he's doing. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, we have Lily, and she has this major heart issue, and then we have Mackenzie, who's got a developmental delay. And all of a sudden, we bring them into our home, we adopt them, and now we have our own baby who has both a medical heart issue and a developmental delay. And she said, I figured out what's God doing. I connected the dots. God gave us Lily and Mackenzie to prepare us for Addie. And emotionally, she hugged, she wrapped her arms around that concept, and that became her guiding strength in this whole thing. I know what God is doing. I can face this with confidence because this is what God's will is. This is what he's up to. And when Addie died, and she realized that's not what God was doing at all, she wrestled with disappointment and anger with God in a way that she had never before. And by the way, it's okay to be angry and disappointed with God. But I sat there, I remember talking to the guys and saying, it's the weirdest thing, but never once in this whole process have I ever been angry with God. And because this is why. As this whole thing was going down, I realized there are no guarantees. Like you and I sometimes operate under the assumption that God owes us protection, like God owes us, protection from evil and pain and suffering, but God, friends, never makes that promise. Never once does God say that because you sign up for Jesus that somehow you get immunity from evil and immunity from tragedy. In fact, he says the opposite. In Matthew 5:45, Jesus said, God sends rain to both the just and the unjust. In other words, bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people. And so I can face a loss. And I can hurt deeper than I've ever hurt before. And I can experience suffering, and I can still trust God because I haven't believed a lie that somehow God owes me protection, that somehow God owes me provision, that somehow God owes me financial security and safety. And that's why the psalmist can pray and the power of the lament can say that, friends, no matter what the trial is, I can still trust in your unfailing love, and my heart does flip-flops, and I will sing to the Lord because you are good to me. In the middle of this trial, I have seen the goodness of God with more clarity than I'd ever seen it before. In the middle of all of this, here's how I saw this church rise up and carry us. I saw people day after day stop by with meal after meal and gift card after gift card and gift after gift. I saw a college kid, Samantha Klein, team up with Becky to put a benefit concert on in honor of Lily, and in one night raised $12,000 to help pay our medical bills. I've seen people pray. I've heard all over the world people praying and lifting us up. And even bigger than that, even more mind-blowing and beyond any of that, I have watched, and Emily has watched, as people have seen our family's faith in the middle of this. I have seen people, because of the impact of a girl who didn't even get to suck 1 ounce of air on planet Earth, become followers of Jesus Christ because they have seen faith. So you can tell me that God is not good. But my life tells a different story, and it tells it in the middle of pain, and so can yours. And so here's the challenge today. We want you to go home and to write Your psalm, if it's a lament, write a lament. Make your complaint known to God. Make a bold appeal, because we can expect from God. But vow, I will trust in His unfailing love. Will you pray? God, do something in your people today. Your Spirit, your presence is all we need. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. If you're a guest here today and you're kind of checking us out for the first time, here's what we want you to do. In the area you walked by on the way in here, there's a place called guest reception. We have a gift that we want to give you. We want to shake your hand and get to know you. I'll try to get down there through the gauntlet of people before we leave. But we want to shake your hand and begin the process of getting to know you, and maybe we can somehow align what we're trying to do in Christ with what you're trying to do in Christ. In the meantime, friends, let's jump into this battle, this next step of learning to pray side by side for God's presence in the midst of our problems. Amen?